Ladies and gentlemen, the past couple weeks, the live arena meta inside Raid Shadow Legends has consisted of one of two options. So first of all, you can go first and pick Armanz, or you can go second and ban Armanz. And those are basically your only choices. Everybody is picking this goddamn champion, so I've been spending a little bit of time theory crafting and thinking of ways that we can counter him, some strategies and synergies that we can use, and I think I have come up with a pretty decent idea. So if this video is any help to you, if you like the content, anything like that, just go ahead, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to pump out some very good quality Raid Shadow Legends content for you guys to enjoy, and I'm trying to upload once every day or maybe every second day at the most, and we'll see how it goes here. So the champion that we're going to be talking about is actually from the Bannerlord faction. You've probably seen him in the thumbnail. He is a free-to-play friendly champion, and that is going to be Arkmage Hellmut. This guy is acquirable in the easy or normal version of Doom Tower. Just by farming the secret rooms for long enough, anybody is going to get this champion. What makes this guy so insane? Well, it's certainly not his base stats with 925 on the attack. What it is actually going to be is his kit and what he can offer you. So I'm going to go ahead and locate my Arkmage here, and I'll show you the build and all that sort of good stuff. Let me see if I can find them. He's in here somewhere, I swear. Right here. So he has, on the A1, attacks one enemy, fills this champion's turn meter by 10%, fills the turn meter by 20% if this attack is critical. So if turn meter fill on the A1 is pretty fantastic. A2 attacks one enemy, also attacks all other enemies if the first attack is critical, and that's going to have a 50 plus 25% chance, so a 75% chance when booked of placing a stun on the second hit. And after attacking, he's going to decrease the turn meter of each enemy without a stun debuff by 20%. I'm going to go ahead and throw the multipliers on the screen here. The A1 is nothing crazy, but the A2 is an absolute smack of a nuke, and most people might not even know this, but Arkmage Hellmut can actually do a lot of damage. His A3 is also bringing some important buffs, so he's going to place an increased speed, an increased crit rate, and an increased crit damage on all allies for 2 turns. And you might be thinking so far, okay, this is a support champion, he can do some decent damage, turn meter fill on the A1, stun on the A2. How is this guy countering Armanz? What are we talking about here? Well, let's go ahead and hop into his passive, which is very simple, but very important for countering Armanz. He is immune to turn meter decreasing effects. He doesn't have a chance of resisting it. He is just flat out immune. Why is that important? Well, let's go and take a look at Armanz real quick. We come over here to Armanz. His A2 is going to steal all the turn meter from each target except enemies under sheep, and then places a stun debuff. So already with Arkmage Hellmut, we have countered the turn meter steal, which is going to be huge because that means that Armanz is getting less turn meter. How do we counter the buff, or sorry, the debuff placing, you might ask? Well, the perfect way to counter that is actually going to be over here, which is going to be, I'm in the wrong faction, I think, aren't I? It's going to be one of the fusions that we had recently in the Night Revenant, which is White Queen Ancora. Why is White Queen Ancora going to be perfect to pair with Arkmage Hellmut? And it's because of her passive once again. So whenever an enemy tries to place a fear, true fear, freeze, provoke, sleep, stun, or petrification debuff on an ally with the highest crit damage, transfers those debuffs to this champion instead. Also fills the turn meter of this champion by 50% if this champion misses their turn due to one of these effects. This is incredible. If you build out Arkmage Hellmut, like I did, with the highest crit damage on the team, what's essentially going to happen is anytime that you're running into an Armanz team, you're essentially just going to go ahead and have an Arkmage Hellmut that's in immunity gear for the entire duration of the fight. So this guy can't have his turn meter stolen. He brings some great buffs for himself. He can absolutely lay down some nukes. He has very decent base speed, and he can't be stunned when he's with White Queen Ancora. How do I have him built? I don't even have everything ascended, and I don't even have everything fully upgraded, but this is what I was able to push for stats. 4,393 on the attack. He isn't empowered either, so keep in mind now with epic empowerment, you could actually get more use out of this guy. 238 on the speed, 101 crit rate, and 280 on the crit damage. I did not build him with accuracy, and I did not build him with resistance. I am going to start some of the clips that I have here on screen now of me actually taking out some teams in the arena with this guy, in case you're curious how that went. I'm going to go ahead and show you just the gear pieces here if you're curious about that as well. So a triple roll on the crit rate and then a speed roll here on the weapon. Speed, attack, crit damage. This is a very, very good piece from the Merciless set, by the way. We have speed, crit rate, crit damage, and resistance. On the gloves, we have crit damage with some crit rate on the substat. We have attack, crit rate, and crit damage on the chest. And of course, we have speed, crit damage, and a good roll on attack here as well, which is pretty nice. And then on the accessories, this is what we're rocking. Nothing too crazy. Like I say, you could actually get the extra crit damage there as well. I was just trying to build them up with a little bit of resistance, of course. This guy is fantastic. What are we doing for masteries? Let me go ahead and move this. Oops, wrong thing. Don't mind that. Let's try this. There we go. He's built out inside War Master right now, so if you actually built this guy with Helm Smasher, it would be even better, of course. And he is actually in a two-piece Merciless set, so he's not even making use of Savage or anything like that, which is pretty crazy considering some of the damage that he was able to put out. You can build this guy out a little bit better. So now let's go over some substitutions. You might be thinking, well, what can I do if I don't have White Queen Ancora? Maybe I'm fighting in Tag Team Arena and she's with Narcisse on a different team and I don't want to use her in this composition. Well, there are still many options that you can do. Having this champion immune to the turn meter steal gives us a lot of wiggle room to play with. A good example is if, for example, you have somebody like a Pythion that you can build out in a stone skin or an immunity set or just high resistance so that he can actually resist the turn meter steal and the stuns coming in from the Armanz. Then he can come in here and remove the debuffs, right? So if you have basically any sort of a cleanser, hell, even if you're looking for a free-to-play option, you could run him with somebody like a Doom Priest in the team going before him to remove that debuff, right? If he gets stunned, because he is immune to that turn meter steal, which means that he can still get a turn, but he does unfortunately have no immunity against the stun coming in. So that's why we need the Ancora or some other way to deal with that. Other options, of course, is if you have somebody like a Marichka that can help. If you have a block debuffs champion like a Cardiel or a Skytouch Shaman or anything like that. Another good option would be actually the Lady Mikage. On her A2, she can decrease the duration of all enemy buffs and allied debuffs by 1 turn. So if she has resistance or in stone skin and goes before the Archmage Hellmut, she's actually going to be able to basically pseudo-cleanse off that stun that gets placed on him, of course. There's a lot of options that you can run with him and still have this be a viable composition, I would say. Of course, what you could do as well, if you have it, is you could actually come down here and you could just straight up build him out in immunity. I was thinking about this, but I don't have very good immunity pieces, so I couldn't get very good stats on him if I wanted to do speed and crit rate and all those sorts of things together, right? So you could definitely build him out in immunity, though, and he would be, well, immune to that stun. You don't need to worry about the turn meter decrease or anything like that. Another incredible combination that you can do with this champion is running him with somebody like... let's go and take a look down here. If you ran him with a Necrit, of course, that would be a very, very good way to go. But there is another champion here who might be an Undead Hordes, I believe. Yes, it's going to be Khafru. Khafru is going to go ahead and place an Unkillable and a Taunt on himself. Why is that important? Well, if we come back over to Armanz once again, Armanz has a single target sheep on the A3, so a taunt buff in your team is actually going to make sure that this sheep has to go on whoever has the taunt buff placed on them, because that is the one way that Armanz can still get into the fight, essentially, is by having this sheep placed on Arkmage Hellmut. So as long as you have maybe even like a Shuzen or something like that that can cleanse that sheep, if you have somebody who can taunt and take that sheep instead, or of course if you just have somebody that can ensure that Armanz doesn't get a turn, right? So I think this is a strategy that's definitely going to be used. Let's go ahead and talk about the teams that you'd be looking to counter. I won't lie, this is mainly going to be a classic arena option because you do want a little bit of agency over which teams that you're choosing. So we'll talk about some of the champions that you do want to fight against or not fight against for that matter. Let's take one last look at Archmage Helmet here though. So the one thing to note is, of course, attacks all other enemies if the first attack is critical. So it is predicated on that first hit being critical, which you'll see how that makes a difference here momentarily. Let's go ahead and take a look. So this team, for example, could be a very good team to fight with the Archmage Helmet. However, the one thing to be aware of course, is that UDK does counter him semi-effectively because the UDK is Force and Archmage Helmet is, of course, Magic. So Archmage will quite often weak hit against the UDK, which means, of course, you're not going to get that second all-enemy attack, which is definitely going to slow down the fights. If you came in here and had a team like this, though, for example, as long as you're okay surviving against the Trunda, so again, Archmage Helmet doesn't necessarily have to survive. If I was going to go against a team like this, what I would probably do is I would bring in maybe even somebody like an Arbiter just to get the speed aura and the buff. I'd bring in somebody like White Queen. I would bring in, obviously, my Archmage wherever he might be. And then I would scroll back here and I'd bring in my UDK. And I think this would be a fairly effective team because, of course, the White Queen is going to be able to revive, essentially, if my Archmage goes down. The Arbiter can bring increased attack if she stays alive. The UDK is going to fairly effectively counter the Trunda's A2 and also quite effectively counter her A1 as well. And, of course, with somebody like an Armanz in the other team, you would probably be best suited running a UDK. Because this guy is just insane. On his A1, he has a chance of increasing the cooldown, so if you have a UDK, that hit's going to go to him instead, so he's not going to mess with the cooldowns or anything like that on your Archmage Helmet. Another option that you could do is you could very easily bring in somebody like a Marichka, of course, so that if they do go first and they manage to kill you, she's essentially just going to revive on death everybody else, and it's a very, very effective strategy as well. Probably my go-to way, just in case anybody is curious, essentially this team right here is my go-to way to counter any sort of Armanz team. This would be an incredibly effective counter against this team right here because essentially the AoEs coming in from these champions are going to trigger the Taurus counterattack, and then even when he goes, it's going to trigger the Taurus counterattack, and then of course White Queen Ankara basically just goes ahead and cleanses. So that's how that team works, that's how I counter it. But again, you could easily substitute in an Archmage Helmet, and we'll just see how that goes. Let's actually run the fight here in real time just so that you can see essentially what I'm talking about. Hopefully I win this one. I don't know. This isn't pre-recorded. I'll look kind of silly if I lose it, but we'll see how she goes. Of course, Stone Skin is... Oh my goodness, that's a bit of a nuke coming in there as well, to be sure. Trunda hasn't even taken a turn yet, which is crazy. There we go, though. So we are essentially just going to go ahead and res at this point. Everybody gets reset, though, unfortunately. He is probably dead, honestly. Ooh, okay, there we go, there we go. All right, so you can kind of see the damage he'll bring at least. Let's go ahead and hit into the Kaimar. And you can see that he does actually have some utility as well, where he's able to stun the rest of the champions. I don't think, of course, I'm going to win this particular fight. A little bit of RNG went against me there, unfortunately. A very effective way to run this champion would, of course, be with a Stone Skin buff as well, which would certainly help. And you do just want to try and pick your battles, of course. So probably a little bit better, instead of running against a Trunda, would be something like running against a Monkey King, because your UDK can fairly effectively counter him as well. Or, like I said, if you have a neck rate, you can just go ahead and run him, and you're good to go. That being said, though, I want to thank you guys all so much for watching the video. I hope this helps. Let me know down in the comments below if you have any other ways that you would recommend countering Armanz, or what your thoughts are on this particular matter, as well as, probably the best way to think about it is, if you're picking Armanz, what is something the enemy team can pick that's going to really foil your plans, right? What's something they pick that is going to make you regret your pick to go with Armanz? But thank you guys all so much for watching. Thank you for the support I've had on the channel recently. It means the world to me. I'll see you guys next time.